You've probably heard a lot of people talking about the dollar and its reserve currency status. Well, they're talking about it because the United States is right now in the process of losing its reserve currency status. Now, this might seem very highfalutin and complicated, but in fact, it's very simple. And in fact, it's the reason that you in America have had such a cushy life. It's the reason the dollar's reserve currency status that the US government has been able to go into debt for the past 40 odd years. And especially over the last couple of years, it's been astronomical the amount of debt the United States has gone into. And a lot of people, myself included, have said that this regime of all this debt eventually was going to crash. And well, we are about to see that crash. And your life is about to turn a lot worse economically, financially. Your life is going to become very, very difficult, starting basically now and over the next 24 to 36 months. You're going to get a lot poorer. Everything is going to get a lot more expensive. The quality of life in the United States is going to deteriorate significantly. I mean, it's already kind of, only like that, only so-so. But the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps as many as 5 to 10 years, oh man, it's going to get ugly, really ugly. And it's because the United States is losing, in the process of losing right now, its reserve currency status. So let me explain what that is. The reserve currency status is very simple. See, countries around the world, they trade with one another. And because their currencies change in value all the time, countries find it easier to set a price for the things that they want to buy from one another in the reserve currency. Now, what is the reserve currency? It is a currency that is used around the world, that is accepted everywhere, and that tends to be very solid and stable in value. Ever since 1945, the reserve currency of the world has been the US dollar. And so, for instance, I'm in Japan, I'm a Japanese whatever, and I need to buy some good or service from India. India uses rupees. I in Japan use yen. But we fix the price of the good or service that I'm going to buy in dollars. And it might take, for instance, 3 months for this good or service to change hands from India to Japan. This is quite typical, especially insofar as factories and large organizations are concerned. And so what will happen is that, during these 3 months, I will make various payments to India, but they will all be in dollars because the entire transaction is made in dollars because the dollars tend to be stable in value. And that means that the Indian supplier and the Japanese buyer don't have to be worried about currency fluctuations of the yen or the rupee because the price has been set in dollars, the reserve currency. Now, the Indians get dollars when I buy their good or service. Now, the Indians, of course, take those dollars and they use those dollars to buy other things from other countries. For instance, they might buy goods or services from Chile, where I'm actually from. The Indians might buy whatever from Chile, copper, for instance, from Chile. Chile is a great producer of copper. And so what are they going to use to buy that copper? Dollars, the reserve currency. And the Chileans are going to be happy to accept those dollars because they're going to take those dollars and they're going to use them to buy whatever from whatever other country. And so you see, the dollar is the international currency. That's what reserve currency means. And this is great for the American government and the American people. Because what happens is that, all these foreigners, they need dollars for their exchange and trade. And so what do? They all go out and take their local currency, be it the yen, the rupee, the peso, the whatever, and they go out into the open market and buy dollars. Now, when you buy something, that is, when you have a demand for it, it increases in value. It has support, price support, right? Because many people are buying it because they need it for whatever reason. And in the case here, they need it for trade. And so people will buy the dollar, and that keeps up its value. And this is good for the United States, for the United States government and the American people. Because since everybody wants dollars for their international trade, the United States government can issue debt confident that other countries will buy that debt. They will buy that debt because the dollar is a strong currency that everybody's demanding. And therefore, debt issued in dollars is going to be very stable. And so these foreign countries buy treasury bills, treasury bonds. What are they? They're IOUs. They're little bits of paper that give a little bit of interest, and the US government hands them out, gets those dollars from whoever buys those treasury bonds, and uses those dollars to finance, defense spending, social programs, all the other stuff that the US government does. And all the other stuff that the US government does, of course, affects your life, makes your life better. And so that's how the US government can go into deficit spending. Because for any other country in the world, the government that has large deficits, it could not long endure. It would have to do one of two things: either cut spending, i.e. cut social programs or cut defense spending or cut whatever, or raise taxes. One or the other. That's what every other government in the world would have to do. But the United States, because it has the reserve currency status, it doesn't have to cut spending and it doesn't have to raise taxes. Essentially, the American people, by way of the reserve currency status of the dollar, the American people can have their cake and eat it too. You see? They can get all the services they want and the taxes aren't going to go up. But the problem is, what happens when the rest of the world starts thinking, maybe it's not such a smart idea to be using the dollar as the global reserve currency? You see, for other countries to use the dollar as the global reserve currency, they have to have faith that the dollar, number one, is going to remain steady in value, and number two, that the US government isn't going to do anything stupid like, sanction their entire country, cancel a whole country, like the United States just canceled Russia. The United States canceled Russia, sanctioning it to oblivion. I mean, basically dropped a financial thermonuclear weapon on the Russian economy. And because of this, all of a sudden, Russia is cut out of the global markets in commodities, which are Russia's main exports, right? But the rest of the world needs those commodities. And Russia has said that from here on out, they're not going to take dollars. They're only going to take rubles or some other currency, but not dollars. And so all of these other countries that need Russian commodities, like oil, like wheat, like natural gas, like aluminum, like titanium, like all the other stuff, neon gas, everything. Well, all of a sudden they're realizing we can't get dollars. Dollars are no good because the Russians will not accept the dollar for their commodities, for their wheat, for their barley, for all the other stuff that they produce. And so the rest of the world is realizing that they have to get other currencies like the ruble. And so because of this, they are getting out of the dollar. The demand for dollars is going down because the United States canceled Russia. And so all of a sudden, everybody realized that the dollar is not necessary to buy Russian goods or services. They need to get other currencies. And so as less people want dollars because dollars don't buy what Russia has to sell, there's less demand for the dollar. And as there is less demand for the dollar, the United States will find it harder and harder to sell treasury bonds. And as it finds it harder and harder to sell treasury bonds, it's going to have less and less money to pay for its armed forces, for its social welfare programs, and all the rest of it. And so what will the United States do to cover that deficit that it has? Well, it'll come to a point where it has to actually print money, print up dollars to cover all of its expenses. And people will realize this. In fact, the United States has been doing this for a while. It's been a circular trade, and it's too complicated for this short video, but believe me, the quantitative easing programs is basically, the government printing money to cover its expenses. And people are not stupid. People realize this. And this whole daisy chain, this whole game of musical chairs, that's a better analogy, it's been going on for a while. But people now, with this Russia situation, they're realizing the dollar might not be a good store of value, and they're getting out of it. And as they get out of it, the government finds itself in the position of needing to print more dollars. And people realize that all of a sudden, oh my God, they are printing dollars, and these dollars don't have much value. So the dollar gets even more weak. And as it gets weaker, the US government finds itself in a position of having a bigger deficit and needing to print more. And it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. And as it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle, see, people realize that the dollars that they have are losing value every day. There is less demand for the dollar. And so as the value of the dollar goes down, the price of everything else, of commodities, oil, food, and all the rest of it start to go up and up and up. And you, of course, your salary is in fixed dollars. And so you all of a sudden are going to find yourself poor. Instead of having to pay, I don't know, $30 to fill your gas tank, it's going to be $70, $80, $90 to fill your gas tank. And let's not even talk about food. See, this is what has happened with this whole notion of virtue signaling. Because ultimately that's what it is, man. It's virtue signaling. You know, the US government wanted to virtue signal that it was really upset with Russia for invading Ukraine. And because of it, it punished Russia, but it's not realizing that the punishment it inflicted on Russia is actually coming back at them, boomeranging back at the American government, at the American people, and hurting the American government and the American people even worse than it's hurting the Russians, because that's fact. A lot of the markets are realizing that all these sanctions against Russia, yeah, short-term pain, but in 3 to 6 months, everything is going to be hunky-dory in Russia. But in the United States, in 3 to 6 months, you are going to be poorer. And I'm not telling you this in any kind of, there's no schadenfreude here. I'm just telling you what's going on. And it's very important that you understand this whole notion of the reserve currency status. Because as the United States loses it, people around the world don't want dollars. And since they don't want dollars, your standard of living is going to decay substantially. This is what's going on. And you better face it. And you better prepare for the consequences. Because it's going to be a very, very bumpy ride.